Welcome to Saying Yes and Sometimes No, an episode that looks at the benefits of both. A big thank you. We just completed our Permission to Want More, What's Next and What's Left series. A big thanks to our guests, those who listened, and those who requested the companion guide that went with this particular series. That's still available. If you like, you can reach us at unabashedyou@gmail.com and ask us for that, and we'll be happy to send it your way. So, this is our 300th episode. There's a lot to celebrate. We have been to 117 countries as of now, had over 200 guests. Some came more than once, some became friends. But I want to be really clear that this is not about me. I believe that it's divine. It's a blessing. It's a challenge. Sometimes it's very frustrating. Sometimes it's very joyous. Do I think that God gave me this nudge very specifically for a podcast? I don't. I believe he gave me a nudge to reach out and to challenge and to encourage and to help people ponder and think and make decisions. That's what I think. Or just to be entertained or have a little fun. So I don't think it was a specific thing, but I think it was a general thing that he planted in me. And I see that he's done that throughout my life in becoming a teacher and becoming a director of a theater arts program for youth. All those things were nudges, and that's the way they played out. So when do you say yes? That's what we're going to talk about today. When to say yes, when to say no, how you can sort of tell the difference, because I think that's important when it comes to making a decision. All right. So when do you say yes? I would say for me, it's when I realized that there was a risk. I was a little bit excited and also a little bit scared. And whether you say yes or no, the outcome is unknown. You don't know how it's going to go. I did not know how this was going to go. I just was following the desire to just express and to share. So you realize there's a risk. You're a little bit scared. You're also a little bit excited. And so I did say yes to this podcast. No one asked me. I just wanted to and figured out how to do it. God put the desire there. I wasn't sure what to do with it, but this is how it came out. This is how it got expressed. So these are the yeses. The other thing that happened around that same time is I started seeing the phrase, "What are you waiting for?" Now, we've talked about this before in the show when you feel like God is talking to you in a very specific way through different things people say, different things you read, different things you see. I kept seeing that, "What are you waiting for?" So I ended up writing it out somewhere where I could see it every day. That became sort of the impetus, that little extra bit of encouragement to say yes. So these are the yeses. How do you know when yes is a good decision? Well, yes, when it aligns with your values. A yes that reflects who you are and what matters most to you is usually a healthy yes. So you would ask yourself, does this fit my faith, my priorities, and the person I want to become? That's a good question. If the answer is yes, I think you should proceed. You want to say yes when it stretches you, not breaks you. There's a real difference between those two things. Stretching is growth, stretching is outward, forwards. Not always easy. We're not saying it's easy. We're saying that it's a stretch, not a break. Growth often aligns and lives just outside your comfort zone. A little fear isn't always a warning sign. It can actually be an invitation. And that's what it was for me when I had zero idea how to do any of this. The tech side, no idea, none of it, no idea. But I was saying yes. So I figured it out. Most things you can figure out. Might be hard, might be challenges, might be hurdles, but you can figure them out. So That fear, like I said, isn't a warning sign. It could be an invitation. You're the one that gets to decide that. So you can ask yourself, am I scared because it's wrong or because it's new? And so there's a difference between if it's not wrong, unhealthy for you, versus if it's new, exciting, challenging. All right, so that's what you can ask yourself. A third way you can say yes, decide when to say yes, when it's a clear opportunity, not a guilt trip. Okay, opportunity versus guilt trip, those are two very different things. Again, you get to decide, you get to discern which is which. The best yeses come from desire, purpose, or conviction, not obligation. And that is true of this endeavor here. That's been 6 years in the making. Wow. So you can ask yourself, would I still say yes if I didn't feel guilty saying no? And that gets into some people pleasing. And so that's again for you to really analyze the yes versus the no. What about when you decide to say yes when it brings you closer to your purpose? And I think that's what this podcast was for me, closer to my purpose. Some opportunities move you toward the life you're called to live. And that is definitely true in my case. They may require effort, but they create momentum, that growing forward, growing forward. You are you, that we don't want that to change. We just want you to expand and be all the you can possibly be and to not get stuck or settle into letting fear, shame, or guilt stop you from that growth. So you could ask yourself, will this help me become more of who God created me to be? Will this help me become more of God, of who God created me to be? If that's a yes, then it's a yes. All right. So what about deciding to say yes when you have the capacity to give your best? So a good opportunity at the wrong time can still be a bad yes. Healthy yeses respect your energy, your commitments, and your season of life. So you want to ask yourself, do I have the time, the emotional bandwidth, and resources to do this well? And that's a really good measuring stick for how to decide if it's yes or no. So, a simple way to put this is that you want to say yes when it aligns with your values, supports your purpose, and stretches your growth without requiring you to abandon yourself. Wow, that's a really good way to think of it. So, a good yes doesn't come from pressure, it comes from purpose. It honors who you are, where God is leading you, and what matters most in this season of life. That's a good yes. And that is why and how I said yes to this endeavor. And God has blessed it beyond anything I could hope for or imagine. As I've said times before, that I knew my mom would listen to it. I knew some of my friends would listen to it. And I'm just so humbled and excited, and it encourages me and spurs me on to continue because that's part of my purpose is to encourage and to help that in each one of you to grow forward, to expand into who you already are. So what about when to say no? Because I think we need to get better at yeses, and I think we also need to get better at nos. So here's an example from my life. I gave you an example of a yes, which was the podcast, and here's an example of a no. I was asked to be on a board of a company I had worked for and poured 15 years into. I love this company. I loved so many things about it. I loved so much of what I got to do there. Very innovative, creative, organizational, mentoring. I mean, it had all the things wrapped into one. that I love to do. It stretched me. It was fabulous. And I was asked two different times. And each time, as I thought about it, I realized I felt torn, but I also felt like I think I'm people pleasing if I say yes. It was a bucket list item to be on a board, and then it kind of might be prestigious, but I didn't feel good about a yes. There was still something kind of in the pit of my stomach that knew I could not do this well. I could not do this well. And since I knew that going in, even though there was a mixture of things around it, I decided to say no. It was a healthy no. So when you feel it in your gut to say no, your main motivation is to people please, or you've got that mixture, but you've got that just that little ounce of dread. I said no. So that was an example. I was torn, but ultimately it was a better decision for me. I also like the phrase, that doesn't work for me, which I think there are a bunch of phrases, and I want to do a whole episode around all these phrases I think we need to have handy, just handy in our back pocket, ready to whip out when we need it. And this is one of them. That doesn't work for me. You don't have to explain. You don't have to get into all the reasons why it doesn't work for you. You don't have to convince anybody else that it doesn't work for you. You knowing that it doesn't work for you ultimately is all that is necessary. But that's part of our people pleasing, where we get in there like, well, that doesn't work for me because of this, because of that, because of this, because of that. You're trying to explain and you're trying to please the other person in saying the no. And just very neutrally, very matter-of-factly, that doesn't work for me. Thank you for thinking of me. And I wish you great success. It doesn't have to be a big trying to win them over and your reasons why. Anyway, that's just a little boost, a little thing that's something you can keep in your back pocket. All right, so 5 times when saying no is a good decision. You would want to say no when it violates your values. If saying yes requires you to compromise your beliefs, your integrity, or your convictions, no is the right answer. Can ask yourself, this is so good. Will I be proud of this decision a year from now? That's a really good way to kind of step back to take a more of a 30,000-foot view of the whole thing and to decide, am I going to be proud of this a year from now? That's a good one. All right, next one. You want to say no when you're saying yes out of guilt. So that's not coming from a good place when you're saying yes out of guilt. Guilt is a terrible decision maker. And so are most of our emotions, by the way, too, just throwing that in there. If your yes is motivated by fear or disappointing someone, it may need to be a no. We talked about that a little bit with the people pleasing. So you want to ask yourself, am I doing this because I want to or because I feel an obligation? Those are two very different things, wanting to and an obligation. All right, when to say no, when your plate is already full. Oh my gosh, we can't pour from an empty cup. Every yes costs time, costs you energy, it costs you attention, it costs you emotional bandwidth. So is your plate already full? You want to ask yourself, what will I have to sacrifice if I say yes? And these are really good tools to look at when you are decision making, because often we're motivated either by emotion or people pleasing or whatever it might be. All right, so another time to say no, when it distracts you from what matters most. Not every opportunity is your opportunity. Sometimes a good thing gets in the way of the best thing. So, like me saying no to the board allowed me to continue pouring into the podcast and into coaching and into these other things I felt or more aligned with my purpose and my resources. So sometimes a good thing gets in the way of the best thing. So you want to ask yourself, does this move me toward my purpose or away from it? I weekly get emails of people reaching out and wanting me to like to endorse a product or whatever. And it's very flattering at first. And then I think, wait a minute, is that helping my purpose of getting this out? And really sort of analyzing and asking myself, what would this be for? And I ultimately say, no, thank you so much for the consideration. I wish you success, blah, 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 all those, answering it with integrity and respect. All right. So, because I want to keep moving toward my purpose. All right. So, our last one on when saying no is a good thing, a good decision. Saying no when you need to protect your peace. Oh my gosh. This is so good. When you need to protect your peace. Peace isn't selfish. It's not selfish, by the way. Boundaries aren't mean. They are necessary, and they are a form of love, by the way. Let's do a whole episode on that or a series on boundaries. So, so important. We get that confused. We think because we have faith, because we identify as a Christian, that there are all these things we have to do. And that's not true. That is not true. It can't be at the expense of who you are. Not at all. Okay, so boundaries aren't mean. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to decline. No, that doesn't work for me. Ask yourself, will saying yes create resentment, stress, or exhaustion? Then those are very good reasons to say no. You don't want resentment, stress, exhaustion, these other things to creep into the life that you're building and having for yourself. So, a simple rule would be to say no when the cost is to your peace, your purpose, your values, your well being is greater than the benefit. Get that in there, y'all. Every time you say yes to something that doesn't belong in your life, you're saying no to something that does. And I like that. I got to say that again. Every time you say yes to something that doesn't belong in your life, you're saying no to something that does. It's kind of a mind-bending thing, but there's value and truth in that. In this season, your no isn't rejection, it's direction. It's how you protect the life God is calling you to live. Wow, these were so good. I had just a great challenge putting these together for you and for me too. Remember that every single one of these episodes I find very inspirational, doing the research for them. And, and when we have guests on, having the conversations, doing the research for those, absolutely incredible. I get so much from this, and I'm so glad for those of you who do as well. So there we are, the yeses and the nos, when it's good to say yes and when it's better to say no. And I would say, really take this to heart and think about it. And you might even want to do some writing around it. And if you want the outline for this, reach us at unabashedyou@gmail.com. I'd be happy to share that with you. And so there we are, celebrating 300 episodes, 6 years. Wow. God is indeed good. Thank you all.